You're listening to the Sabina Road Baptist Sermon Series. We hope this message greatly impacts your life. For more information on the mission and ministries of Sabina Road Baptist Church in Tucson, Arizona, visit us online at sabinaroad.org.
I invite you to turn your Bibles to Joshua chapter 3. Going through our series, A Journey of Faith. The title of today's message is One Step. Joshua chapter 3. Several years back, I was at a men's event, and they had a guy who was sharing the gospel, but he was also a professional archer, and he was really good at hitting his targets. And so he gave his testimony and how Christ had worked in his life, but he also gave a demonstration of his abilities, and there was a lot of hunters there, and they really enjoyed that. And an interesting part of the story, so after he had taped these balloons up to this kind of a board and shot them all, I mean, didn't miss one, just one after another, boom, 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 nailed every one of them. Then he calls up a little boy, and just a little guy, which reminds me, I'm glad that JR is here today. He's been in the hospital, and so he's doing a little better, so we're glad that he's here. We'll keep praying for him that he keeps getting better. So I'm glad that you're here, big guy. And so a little guy, probably about JR's age, and he asked him to come up there and put the balloon on his head, just like William fell. And so every one of us are sitting in there going, I think this is a terrible idea, and nobody wants to say that. And so he's really kind of milking the crowd. And so, should I do this? And everybody's thinking, he won't do this. There's no way he'll do this, right? This is bad. And so long story short, he pretends like he's going to do it, and then he doesn't, because I don't care how good you are, you don't shoot something off a child's head. That's just not a good idea, right? And but so with that part's kind of a funny part by itself. But here's I thought was very interesting. There's a little boy that got called up after we talked to him after the meeting, as he didn't know that it was a joke, and that he really believed that he was going to put that balloon on his head, and this man was going to shoot it right off the top of his head. Talk about faith in action. Now maybe that might have been misplaced faith, and I never would have done that or recommended it, but he had faith and trust in this individual, and then he put it into action. You see, crossing the Jordan for Israel meant either one step forward was obedience and blessing, and one step backwards was disobedience and cursing and the failure of another generation of Israel. So a question that we're going to be wrestling with today is, what one step is the Lord asking you to take? You see, faith requires movement. A faith that does not move you, I would say, is no faith at all. So we'll be looking at that in our passage today. This is sort of a longer chapter. We'll break it up into some sections here, but let's pray before we get to our message. Father, I pray that you would speak to our hearts. Lord, I pray that you would help me to decrease, Lord, and for you to increase. Lord, you want us to move and act and live a life that is pleasing to you. And so, Lord, I pray that you would make that clear to us in this message. What steps of obedience that we need to take. Love you, and we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Point number one is faith moves us. Look at verses 1 through 13 of Joshua chapter 3. So then Joshua rose early in the morning, and they set out from Shittim. And as they came to the Jordan, he and all the people of Israel lodged there before they passed over. At the end of 3 days, the officers went through the camp and commanded the people, as soon as you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God being carried by the Levitical priest, then you shall set out from your place and follow it. And there shall be a distance between you and it about 2,000 cubits in length. Do not come near to it, in order that you may know the way you shall go. For you have not passed this way before. Then Joshua said to the people, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. And Joshua said to the priests, take up the ark of the covenant and pass on before the people. So they took up the ark of the covenant and went before the people. Verse 7, the Lord said to Joshua, today I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel. They may know that as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. And as for you, command the priests who bear the ark of the covenant, when you come to the brink of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand still in the Jordan. And Joshua said to the people of Israel, come here and listen to the words of the Lord your God. And Joshua said, here is how you shall know that the living God is among you, that he will without fail drive out from before you the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Perizzites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Jebusites, and the termites, I always like to add. And in verse 11, behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord, all the earth is passing over before you into the Jordan. Now therefore, take 12 men from the tribes of Israel, from each man a tribe. And when the souls of their feet, priests bearing the ark of the Lord of all the earth, shall rest in the waters, and the Jordan shall be cut off from flowing, and the waters coming down from above shall stand in one heap. Point number one, we see a faith that moves us. Israel had been camped out before crossing the Jordan. Remember, they sent spies in there last week, and God blessed that adventure with a very unlikely person of Rahab. And so then they've been camping out where they were supposed to be, and so they've been instructed that with the priests to start carrying the ark, they are to follow it. But they're to keep a distance from the ark of around 1,000 to 2,000 yards, depending on how you measure things. Now you remember the Ark of the Covenant is the sort of box that God told them to make that represents the presence of God within their community. It has manna from heaven in it. It has the 10 Commandments in it. And it has Aaron's staff in it. And if a person touches it, what happens to them, church? They die. So God says, follow it, but don't follow it too closely. We see two different aspects of God's nature in this command. His close, comforting presence and his awesome, fearsome glory. In the story of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which is a great story for children, I highly recommend it for little kids and for adults alike. And in that story, there's Aslan. And Aslan is a great big lion, and he's the Christ figure. He's in that story. And so when these people from Earth, they come to there, and then they're learning about Aslan, and they find out that he's a lion. One of the little girls she's kind of afraid about that, and she says, well, is he safe? Which is a fair question. And the person who she's asked responds, who said anything about safe? He's not safe, but he's good. Brothers and sisters, make sure we understand the God that we're talking about. God is not safe. God, our New Testament says, is a consuming fire. To be in the very presence of God in the Old Testament times and then now before glorified bodies would absolutely destroy us. But just because he's not safe doesn't mean that he is not good. And so we see that they are to follow this ark, but at a distance. And they're given instructions by Joshua to consecrate themselves because they are about to see wonders. Now, if you remember, that word wonders is the same word that God used when he was talking to Moses. And he said, I'm about to do wonders here in Egypt. And that's when he sent all the plagues and freed Israel. So Joshua's got to be like, man, things are about to get real interesting when he says wonders, because things get wild when God says that. It's sort of the equivalent of the word miracle, but they don't really have that in the Old Testament. And in verse 5, we see, look at verse 5. It says, then Joshua said to the people, consecrate yourself, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. So consecrating is a setting apart. It involved washing, it involved abstinence from marital relations, and food. It was a time of setting ourselves apart for God's service. And so through Joshua, God instructs the people how to cross the river. See, God would not work, God would not act until they stepped into the water. Are you with me, church? Now, God can do whatever He wants to do. But He said, this is the way I'm going to do it. You're going to get your priests. They're going to carry the ark. They're going to stand in the Jordan. And I will not act, I will not move until they do what they're supposed to do. Are you following me so far? Now, I've got a little video I want us to show here. It shows the Jordan River at flood stage. Because oftentimes, you can go ahead and play it whenever you're ready. Now, the Jordan River, this is that flood stage. It's usually, this wouldn't be an impressive feat to see the Jordan River. But as most rivers become at flood stage, they can increase 1, 2, 5, 10 times larger than what they are. And so it goes from being a safe river to deadly and dangerous. And this was not an accident by God, by the way. I've seen flash floods where I've seen water move in a hurry. I've never seen water escape in a hurry. So let's look at our first principle for today. See, true faith leads to obedient action. See, when God calls us to a task, we must act. When God calls you to a task, you must act. It doesn't matter if it seems impossible, illogical, dangerous, unimportant, or maybe even just different than the way that you would do it. If God says this is what you're supposed to do, if God says you must act, then you must obey. Now, there's always challenges to following God. Our own wisdom and feelings and experience get in the way of our obedience sometimes, don't they? God says do this, and we say, Lord, I'm just not comfortable with that. I've never done it that way before. I don't think we want to do it. Maybe fear stops you from obeying God. Fear has stopped a lot of saints from doing what God has called them to do. Say, God, I would do that, but I just can't. I can't go to that place. That's too dangerous. I'm too scared. I can't have this conversation. I could get fired. I can't do these things, God. Well, then you're letting fear drive you and not faith. Sin can stop a believer from doing what he's supposed to do. God, I can't use me. Look at the life that I live. We have to understand every one of those things. Our own wisdom or feelings, fear and sin, they're all a lack of trust in God. That God's ways are good. He is good. What He calls you to is good. But we lack faith in Him. You see, faith drives you to service. Faith moves you. A faith that doesn't move you isn't real faith. Most sharks, whether you realize this or not, they have to keep moving. Now, some sharks are designed otherwise, but sharks must move or they die. You see, because the way their gills are set, when they move, it pushes the oxygen that is in the water into their breathing apparatus, so it goes through the gills and makes them live. And so a shark that does not move dies. Are you with me, church? Believers that do not move begin to spiritually die. If you say, hey, I'm just going to coast here for a while, you're not coasting, you're dying. See, God is always pushing you to, always moving you to a greater trust, greater faith in Him. And so you always are moving forward in your spiritual life. To not move forward is really to move backwards in our relationship with God. See, according to James, we know faith without works is dead. What he's saying, a faith that does not move you is not real faith. So if you've never done anything for God's kingdom and you don't want to do anything for God's kingdom, can I just give you a little reality check? According to Scripture, you may not have a real faith. Well, I prayed a prayer. I got dunked sometime. I don't care. The Bible doesn't care. God doesn't care. He says faith moves your feet. Now we have times of growth, times of weakness. Absolutely. We ebb and flow. Absolutely. But if you're not moving forward in your faith, you need to check your faith. See, faith is a unique, temporary opportunity that God gives us to cooperate with Him. God didn't have to make it where we come to Him in faith. We won't always have this relationship of faith with God. It says in Revelation that we'll see the face of God. But God has given us this temporary opportunity of faith. And it's challenging. Kierkegaard says this: life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forward. Right? I wish it was the other way around sometimes, but if you want to understand life, you can only see it in the rearview mirror. Life is always moving us forward. So the first principle is true faith leads us to obedient action. The second principle is this: God puts us in situations where we can only depend on Him. God puts us in situations where we have no other option but to depend on Him. Israel could not cross the Jordan. Israel could not defeat Jericho. But Israel could not take the land without God. He was calling them to do what they could not do by themselves. This is characteristic of God in the Old Testament, and He does the same things with us in our modern day lives. The story is told of a man who had slipped off a cliff, and before he fell down to his death, he managed to grab onto a tree branch, and while he was hanging on the precipice of this cliff, he screamed out, Can anybody help me? And a voice came from the sky. It said, Yes, I can help you. Do you believe I can help you? And the man said, Yes, I believe. And the voice said, Do you believe that I love you enough that I can help you? The man said, Yes, I believe. The voice said, Do you believe I have enough power to help you? The guy said, Yes, I believe. He said, All right. The voice from heaven said, All right, I'll help you. Just let go. After a brief pause, the man says, Is there anybody else up there? This is how we feel, right? God says, Hey, I want you to rely on me. I'm pushing you to situations and circumstances where you really can't rely on anybody else. And oftentimes we say, Is there anybody else out there? Because this is too tough. This is where Israel was at, and this is where we are at anytime. See, only God can fix our nation. You understand? Only God can fix our nation. Amen. That's good. I'm telling you, I watch the news. I'm telling you, apart from God's saving hand, we will not be saved. God and God alone saves our nation. We have no other option. God and God alone can transform the heart of that spouse that you're praying for. God and God alone can do that. Only God could fix your marriage. And only God gets the credit for it. See, there's the kicker, right? See, when God allows us in situations where we're so desperate that we'll actually call out to Him, then we're quick to give Him credit because we have no ability to take credit for ourselves. So in Jordan River moments, can I just encourage you to do this? Seek God first. Seek Him first. Because when you're going through difficulty, when you're going through challenging times, one of the first things that you'll want to do is go to other people. Now, there's some great sources that you can go to, of friends, family members, and spouses that love you and care about you. But when you're in Jordan River moments, go to your Father first. Ask Him to calm the fear within. Ask Him to guide and direct you. Don't go to other people for what only God can give. Go to God first. And when you're in these challenging times, these times of growth and like I said, challenging moments, I encourage you, make sure your prayer is God, help me to grow. Don't go. Because your natural reaction and my natural reaction when we're going through difficult times is to say, God, please just get me out of here. I'll do anything. Just fix this situation. But many times God has allowed these situations to come into your life to grow you, to mature you, to complete you according to the New Testament, right? He wants us to be more like Christ. And so God has allowed these situations in on purpose. So we're asking for them to go away as fast as possible. And God's saying, let them change you and shape you. Seek God first. Grow, don't simply go. Let's look at the second point briefly. So we have first point was faith moves us. Point number 2 is faith helps us move others. Look at verses 14 through 17. So when the people set out from their tents to pass over the Jordan with the priest bearing the Ark of the Covenant before the people, and as soon as those bearing the Ark had come as far as the Jordan, and the feet of the priest bearing the Ark were dipped into the brink of the water, parentheses, now the Jordan overflows all its banks throughout that time of harvest. So God has brought them here in flood time, and He did it on purpose. The waters coming down from above stood and rose up in a heap very far away at Adam, the city that is beside the Rephaim, and those flowing down toward the sea of Arabah at the Salt Sea were completely cut off, and the people passed over opposite of Jericho. Now the priest bearing the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord stood firmly on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan, and all Israel was passing over on dry ground until all the nation finished passing over the Jordan. You see, faith moves us, but true faith helps move other people. So we see the priests were carried the ark and they step into the water, and then God, if you can imagine this just for a second, that God splits the water continues this way, and the water backs up miles and miles away, and maybe you can see it in the sky, maybe the mist is flowing for miles and miles away, and then we see the mighty hand of God. And so God's priests are called first and foremost to go and stand in the middle of this river that just a couple of minutes before had been flooded, dangerous and deadly. But God did something that only God can do, and then people stand and do what they're supposed to do so other people can come in and walk across the river. Just in case you were confused about what God can do, look at verse 13. It says, the ark of the Lord of all the earth. And there's a lot of people that read Scripture and say, oh man, you going to believe these folk tales about some God that can raise water and heal people? What a joke. But if my God really is the God that He says He is, which is the Lord of all the earth, and the God who made water and the laws that control water, can surely stop water for just a couple moments. Because He is the Lord of all the earth. And the children of Israel crossed over on dry ground. See, believers stand firm on God's commandments. Ironically, it is their immovability that helps others move. Are you with me, church? When the priests stood, it was their immovability that allowed the rest of the nation across the Jordan River. As believers, we stand on God's truth to help move people closer to Christ and not hold them back. We're not holding on to biblical text just because that we were afraid to move forward into a progressive era. No. We know that true faith, true saving faith moves people forward. And so when we hang on to biblical truth, when we stand on the gospel, it does the opposite of holding people back. We're not ignorant. We're not backwards. We want to move people forward. But to move people forward is to move them to Christ. Are you with me, church? So to be progressive doesn't mean that you go with the next latest idea. To be progressive means to follow after God. See, if you are going one direction where you need to go and you take a wrong turn, the faster you're going the wrong way, the faster the person turns and goes backwards is the most progressive thing somebody can do. And our nation has turned its back on God and His truth and this pursuit of being progressive. But I'm telling you, brothers and sisters, they've made a wrong turn. And so they're moving away from the right destination. So we want to call them back through repentance and through faith in Jesus Christ. And we're going to stand on His truth, uncompromising, pointing people to a God that loves and saves them. Our faith helps others move. The story is told of a guy in frontier days when his wife got very sick. And so he had to go out and get her some medicine or she likely would die. And so in that process, it was in the winter time, and so he goes and he has to get across a frozen lake. And he's not sure how thick the ice is, and so he's crawling slowly but surely, afraid, terrified that any minute now the ice could crack. And so while he's in the middle of the lake, he hears thundering on the ice, and it's growing louder and louder, and he's getting more and more terrified as he's sitting there on the ice. And then a team of horses and a carriage flies by carrying some cargo. And the man who was absolutely terrified gets up. His faith has been renewed, and he began running on the ice and gets the medicine to save his wife and gets to his destination. You see, the faith of others people changes how you walk in faith. Are you with me, church? Your faith should help other people serve faithfully. Was a point of application. I encourage you, spend time around people that strengthen your faith. That's one part of what a church is supposed to do. As people who have walked through difficult situations before, they've walked through the winter storm, they've walked across the frozen lake, and they've come through it on the other side. And maybe you're beginning that journey. Maybe you're a new parent and you're afraid, and then you get to walk with the people of faith that have done that before. Maybe you've lost a spouse, but there's all sorts of people that have walked through that journey before, and they can help you across that. In all sorts of situations, we let other people's faith strengthen our faith. But also, we can be the people who walk life together. We want to help strengthen their faith. Spend time with other people. Strengthen other people. And make sure you're spending time with our faithful Lord, the one who is completely faithful. The one who is absolutely dependent. Make sure you're spending time with Him. That allows our faith to lead us to a faith that moves, that helps other people be faithful. See, faith requires movement. One step. What is the one step the Lord is asking to take? As we move into this invitation time today, where is God leading you? If God's not leading you forward, then you need to check. You need to check where your heart is. You need to check where you're walking with the Lord. Maybe you need to follow Him in salvation. Maybe that's your first step. Say, I really don't know the Lord. I've come to church. I thought I was a pretty good person. I thought that made me a Christian. Friend, going to church doesn't make you a Christian any more than going to McDonald's makes you a hamburger, right? That doesn't work that way. But has there been a time in your life when you have turned from your sin, that you've trusted Christ to save you, that you could not do what was required to save yourself? Has there been a time in your life when that's happened? And that needs to be your first step, placing your faith in Jesus Christ. Maybe you need to be baptized and follow Him in obedience. Maybe you need to join this church and get involved and serve faithfully. Maybe there's a ministry that you need to begin, that God has put in your heart. Maybe there's a ministry that already exists, and you're saying, I've been fighting it, but God is calling me to do this. Maybe there's a habit that needs to give up that's been consuming your life, some sort of addiction, some sort of substance that is consuming you. And you say, I need one step of obedience to help me walk with the Lord. One step. One step of obedience can change your life. It changed Israel's, and it can change yours. Well, thank you for your word. So thank you that it challenges us. Well, thank you that you make us rely on you. Because all too often, with our own choices and our own devices, that we would just as soon go at it by ourselves. So thank you that your infinite wisdom, you push us, the loving Father, in situations where we have to depend on you and where we'll grow. Lord, I pray for my brothers and sisters here, whatever step of obedience they need to take, one step, God, I pray that you would make it clear to them, and Lord, that they would obey. We love you, and we ask these things in Jesus' name.